The billionaire's son had no idea his entire life was about to shift. What if the person handing you your morning coffee could sense things everyone else overlooked? Beth had been running the early shift at Mel's Diner for 12 long years, learning to read people the way others read books. She noticed the way a customer's hand shook while reaching for sugar, the way someone's breathing changed the moment they sat down, and the quiet signs that revealed stories louder than spoken words. That Tuesday in October, when a sharply dressed man stepped in with his young son, something instantly felt off. The boy, around 8 years old, moved differently from other kids. His father, obviously wealthy from his tailored suit and confident walk, seemed entirely unaware. But Beth noticed the child's left arm hanging a little limp, his crooked smile, and the way he blinked more with one eye. While his father ordered breakfast and talked about business, Beth couldn't shake the worry that this boy desperately needed help. The morning rush eventually settled, and Beth wiped tables with practiced rhythm, her hands moving automatically while her mind drifted to her grandson who lived far away. At 58, she'd learned that the most important moments often appeared ordinary. Then the bell above the door chimed. Richard Lawson walked in with his son, David, just like they had every Tuesday for the past month. Richard was the type of man who drew attention without effort, silver hair perfectly styled, an expensive charcoal suit, and a phone seemingly fused to his ear. He'd moved to town recently to open a manufacturing plant that promised jobs. 8-year-old David followed behind him, a sweet child with sandy hair and eyes too wise for his age. "The usual table?" Beth asked, gently. Richard barely glanced up, nodding while continuing a call about quarterly projections. He guided David to the corner booth overlooking the old maple tree. As Beth approached with menus, she watched David slide into the booth. The delay in his left arm was still there, and his foot dragged slightly. When she set his chocolate milk down, she noticed his grip was weak and his small hand trembled. "How are you feeling today, sweetheart?" she asked softly, lowering herself to his level. David attempted a smile, but only half his face moved, and when he spoke, his words came out slightly slurred. "I'm okay," he murmured. Richard ended his call with mild impatience. "He's just tired. We stayed up finishing homework. Pancakes and bacon for him and my usual coffee." Beth nodded, though her concern deepened. Through the years, she'd recognized the hidden signs of family struggles, stress, and illness. This was different. David wasn't simply tired. When she brought their food, Beth noted Richard watching his son with the distracted air of a busy parent. David dropped his fork twice trying to cut his pancakes. Richard picked it up each time without noticing why. The third time the fork fell, Beth knelt to help him. "Let me give you a hand, honey," she whispered, steadying his trembling fingers. His left side was undeniably weaker. He looked at her like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. Something was very wrong, and time felt limited. The next Tuesday, the changes were impossible to ignore. David's left arm now completely limp. When he tried to climb into the booth, his left leg buckled. Richard caught him, but his attention drifted back to his phone. "Daddy, my head hurts," David whispered, so quietly Beth barely heard him. "You probably need more water," Richard replied, still scrolling. "Sit straight. Your posture's awful lately." Beth felt her heart twist. This wasn't posture. This wasn't dehydration. When she delivered his chocolate milk, David struggled to lift it even with his right hand. "David, sweetie, can you smile for me?" she asked. Only the right side of his face moved. Cold fear washed over her. She'd seen this with her mother's strokes, though children almost never had strokes, right? "Mr. Lawson?" Beth said steadily, but urgently. "I think David needs to see a doctor." "He's fine," Richard snapped. "Kids today complain too much. He just needs to toughen up." Beth bit her lip. She understood pride, she understood denial. But medical emergencies didn't wait for stubbornness. And then David suddenly swayed, his eyes rolling back. Beth lunged to steady him, feeling his clammy skin and shallow breathing. "David, can you hear me?" she whispered. Richard finally lowered his phone, fear flickering across his face. "What's happening to him?" "I think he might be having a stroke," Beth said quietly. "That's impossible," Richard insisted, though even he could see the left side of David's face drooping. When the boy tried to speak, only garbled sounds came out. "Sir," Beth said firmly, "I've been watching him for weeks. This is serious. He needs help now." Reality struck Richard like a physical blow. His confidence shattered as he truly looked at his son for the first time in weeks. David reached for him with his right hand, struggling, tears streaming. "Call 911, Beth said, moving toward the phone. "No, wait, I'll drive him. It'll be quicker." "Moving him might make it worse," Beth replied calmly. "We need paramedics." As she dialed, Richard finally placed his phone face down on the table. David's breath hitched, his small fingers reaching for comfort he couldn't express. "I'm here, buddy," Richard whispered, his voice breaking. "Daddy's here." Beth asked the other customers to give space and returned with a cool cloth for David's forehead. "Ambulance is on the way. You're doing amazing, sweetheart." Richard looked at Beth, eyes filled with panic. "How did you know? How did you see what I didn't?" She sat across from him. "I've been watching people a long time, and I've watched David worry about you noticing him. He didn't want to interrupt your important calls." The words hit Richard harder than anything. The ambulance arrived. Richard held David's hand as they worked, understanding at last what truly mattered. At the hospital, Beth stayed in the waiting room, offering quiet support. Hours passed before Dr. Patricia Reeves approached. "Mr. Lawson, David suffered a pediatric stroke caused by moyamoya disease, a rare condition where the brain's vessels narrow. If you had waited another day, the damage could have been devastating." Richard nearly collapsed. "But he'll be okay?" he whispered. "The surgery succeeded. He'll need therapy, but children recover remarkably well." Relief poured from him as he sat down. Beth handed him a cup of coffee with gentle steadiness. "Doctor," Richard said with tears, "this woman saved my son. She saw what I missed." "You have medical training?" Dr. Reeves asked Beth. "No," Beth replied softly, "just life, and paying attention." "Your attention gave him his best chance," the doctor said. When Richard finally saw David, the boy was weak, but awake. "Daddy," David whispered, "I was scared you wouldn't notice." "I notice now, buddy. I promise you. I always will." Beth watched from the doorway, relieved. Richard spent the following months learning how to truly be present. He attended therapy sessions, listened to David, and rebuilt their relationship. 3 months later, the diner bell chimed, and David walked in, unsteady but proud. "Miss Beth," he called, smiling brightly as he lifted his left arm. "Look, I can do it again." Beth hugged him tightly. Richard approached, completely changed. His phone was nowhere in sight. His expression was soft, grateful. "Beth," he said, voice thick, "I can never thank you enough." "You don't need to. Just keep being the father you're becoming." As they ate at their usual table, Beth noticed Richard cutting David's pancakes, listening to him talk about school and drawings. "Dad says you're a hero." "I'm just a waitress who notices things," she answered kindly. "Dad notices now too," David added proudly. Before leaving, Richard pulled Beth aside. "I created a scholarship for children who need medical care but can't afford it. I named it the Beth Henderson Fund. I hope that's all right." Tears filled Beth's eyes. "That's more than all right." "And," Richard added, "I stepped down from the board. I'm still involved, but David is my focus now. I learned success means nothing if the people you love feel unseen." As Beth watched father and son leave hand in hand, she felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd changed a life simply by caring enough to notice. Sometimes the most ordinary people perform extraordinary acts of love.